Something I'd like to improve is my relationship to prostration, which is effectively full surrender. There's the physical surrender of, lying face down on the ground, facing the ground, and there's a relationship in my mind to giving up. But surrender and often this relationship to like prayer or meditation is really this release practice of accepting guidance or help. And in terms of meditation, usually it's a guidance coming from our internal selves, from stillness, from quiet. And I'm continually working on that. I inundate my mind, especially in these periods of panic where I'm in survival mode and I'm trying to make things happen, where it is really difficult for me to sit still because the pervading narratives in my mind are that I need to keep going. I need to make something happen. I need to, I can't just waste time here. And even further exacerbated by uh, by child support basically knocking at my door, and I have back taxes, and we're behind 3 months on rent. The nice thing with all of that is that Molly's work with that, we're not going to fall further behind, but we still have to make up some ground, and that's the part that I'm having a hard time with, is making up some extra ground. And so part of my prostration here, or part of a practice of prostration, is a little bit of a plea for help. I know some of you have been following me for a while. You've been subscribed to me here on Substack, or have been following me on various email platforms or on YouTube or any other places. And I am asking for some financial help. Now, there's two approaches, really three. One is I have courses available on Udemy. It's udemy.com/Christian-Adam-Rivera. Let me double check that link, make sure that's what it is. It's udemy.com/user/Christian/-A-Rivera. I'll put a link and all of that stuff. What I actually think is the most useful, and I'll put a direct link to this one, is a course called The Wisdom of the Three Centers. And it's based on the Enneagram. You don't have to know the Enneagram to get the most out of this, but it is the head, heart, and gut centers, and how we can get connected to those centers to ask ourselves various questions of those places and from those places. What is the head trying to ask of us? What is the heart trying to ask of us? And what is the gut trying to ask of us? And then what do we want from each? What are we trying to control from each? I think that's a very powerful course, and if it's something you're interested in, I'd appreciate you go taking care of that if that's something you're interested in and you're wanting to provide some financial support for the work that I do. The other thing is to become a premium subscriber directly here on Substack. I am starting to I have a lot of ideas for different podcast episodes and different things I want to do. So if I do start to get premium subscribers, I will do more premium audios and talking more about my process and what I'm discovering, and particularly access to me in terms of wanting to tell me what kind of deeper topics you're wanting to go into that I can explore, or if I have stuff that I can share, that. So there's that, and then there's the Patreon. So if you want to support and not get further emails, you can go to patreon.com. Let me double check the slash. I think it's slash let's go C note. No, it's going to be slash dopamine. Let me check. I'm doing this in real time because I don't have a plan. I'm actually admittedly a little dysregulated. This is going to be a little bit of a, I guess a little bit of a journal entry in a way, without being too, crossing boundaries or anything. But the idea here is that I'm a little dysregulated. I've been applying for jobs and haven't been getting anywhere, haven't been able to find freelance gigs. It's been a really tough road for this year in particular. And at the same time, really trying to release some more of the inner core stuff, which I think I'm landing on. I think I'm getting towards rejection and abandonment being a major core challenge. And one of the biggest triggers I'm having right now is around moral superiority. I did episodes in the past around Jordan Peterson and why he triggers me, and why Elon Musk sometimes triggers me, and some of these other people. And even in the last episode, I talked a little bit about my prejudice against religious middle class white people at times. And I think there is this uh, ongoing relationship, this improving, this increasing relationship to moral superiority in our day and age that is triggering me left and right because it's something that I have and I've brought to the table. And so I'm getting to know that. I'm actually becoming aware of that. I'm witnessing that. And that's something I want to become aware of and probably release. I'm not even sure if it's mine. And so that's going to be an ongoing investigation and maybe something that I can share as I figure some stuff out. Or if you want to share a little bit of your relationship with moral superiority, and I emphasize your relationship because a lot of videos that I look up or a lot of things that I try to research are usually about those people. They are morally superior. A lot of people are triggered by moral superiority. And I think at scale, that is what happens when we get into wars and things like that. And one of the episodes I want to do in the near future is psychologically preparing for war, because unfortunately that's coming down the pipe, and related to generational theory and all of that stuff. And it's preparing for it in both in psychologically preparing ourselves to remain in stillness during these difficult moments, but then also the realities of what it's looked like in history from an individual perspective, that even though the world is moving, the tectonic plates of thought and physical movement are happening, and emotions, that it does not affect everyone directly. If anything, it actually affects a small percentage relative to the scale. But even though it's going to be a big scale, it's a whole thing. So I'll talk about that more in a further episode. But if you want to just support on Patreon, patreon.com/dopamine, DOPEAMINE, that is also a possibility. I have a $5, $10, and $20 tier. And the one thing I haven't done very well is direct access to me. Substack is one of the ways to do that. And then Patreon is another way to do that, though I don't post on Patreon. So I post on Substack. If you want posts and you want to be a part of that, then by all means, if you become a premium subscriber, that is massively supportive. Or if you want to have other ways to do so, you can directly send me cash on Venmo at Let's Go C Note. That would be incredibly helpful. This is really tough for me to do because I feel like I'm begging, but it is a situation in which, obviously, like if you're in a situation where you can do that, and you've gotten some value from my work, like, please, by all means. But I'm not asking that if you're struggling and you're having a hard time to give anything, please don't. Like, you have your own stuff to worry about. If anything, just knowing that you're listening actually helps. So if you could comment on this post, that is really valuable for me to know that all of this means something and I'm able to support and continue to support. Otherwise, I kind of go back and forth. I don't always feel like I sometimes feel like I'm wasting my time, not necessarily in that, I guess, how else do I put this? I don't get a lot of direct feedback. And so getting direct feedback is really helpful for me to feel like I can keep going with this, especially given the circumstances where things are not going well financially. So my default mode is to just kind of push in the ways that I know how. And in this case, it's like continuing to podcast, I've got things in the works of trying to move the energy from Substack to not getting rid of Substack, but moving the audio portion to Captivate, to like be able to run ads on a certain version of the feed. So that's a whole different, that's technical stuff, and that doesn't matter. So I think where I'm at really is trying to get to know this feeling of frustration and surrender. And I talked about having faith in faith versus faith in God or faith in existence. And I think this is my particular work, right? Moral superiority comes from that faith in faith. It's like my type of faith is what makes things happen, right? And something bigger than that is obviously bigger than myself. Some of it I think is Enneagram 1 work. I realize I watched some stuff from Jordan Peterson this morning because I was like, okay, what is it about this guy that really triggers me? And I think he's not only morally superior, often talking about the moral superiority of others, but I think that he's also a sexual one in the Enneagram. And he's an ENTP most likely as well. So very outspoken, very loud about it, very crude and direct, uh, and really highlights that shadow for me of that moral superiority. And I think that's some of what's coming up around bringing this 16-year-old self in that I was talking about, is that I need to own that this is a thing that I do, and owning it doesn't necessarily mean enabling it, but it is looking at it and becoming aware of it and paying attention to it. And I'm going to continue to do that. And I think I'll report back as I get a little bit of clarity of what that means. I want to thank a couple of you for emailing me. I think in response to that last message, I know people have been using the word transmission lately in the last podcast episode. Joshua emailed me and Rob sent me an email as well. So grateful for you guys. And I know some of you have been following me for a long time, and just grateful for you to continue to follow me. And often I have your face and your minds in mind when I'm talking about this stuff, because I know it's interesting to you. Though I am curious about what other topics are more interesting. Because since I've started this podcast, I've sort of split topics. I went down the INTP rabbit hole for a long time. Like this podcast feed has been an experimentation for a long time. I've done interviews at the beginning. I also did focus on personality types for a little while. Then I did some developmental stuff, and then I did some INTP related stuff. Even talked about male dynamics and masculine mental health and stuff like that for a while. I feel like all of those topics are kind of melding together. I feel like they're hard to separate, but I did start to separate them into different topics. So I have different, if you go to letsgocnote.substack.com, I've got the developmental digest. I've got digital dad that I started, the INTP problem. I kind of separated some things out. And if there are things that you feel like I could probably fold back in, like occasionally I do talk about the stages model or different developmental stuff. Certainly curious to see where you're at, what your circumstance is, maybe what you're working through, and why you listen to this podcast. I should probably set up a survey, honestly, because I really have no idea. Occasionally I get an email where it's like, that was a great episode, thank you. And I'm like, I don't know who you are or why you listened to this episode, So I think I'm asking for two things. Yes, I'm asking for cash and asking for help. And if you're able to provide that, that would be amazing. It would be of major service to me. What I'm effectively looking for is my child support right now is $120 a week, and I haven't been able to afford it for months. And the the government Grim Reaper is coming to knock at my door very soon. So that's the first thing. The other thing, the taxes that can always continue to get pushed back, that's $100 a month. So in total, I'm really looking for, what is it, 240, 480 plus another 100 to 580. Let's say $600 a month is the extra that I'm needing to make on top of things for groceries and stuff like that. That's a little extra, but if we're realistic, let's say 750, I think is what I'm trying to make a month. And so trying to make that work in terms of getting more people to subscribe or getting more Patreoners or getting more course sales and stuff like that. Even if you have advice for how to find more freelance work, I could really use a little bit of help in that regard. So it's not just financially, but I think it's if you have access to people that are looking for design work, video editing work, coaching in the world of personality types, or developmental stuff, anything related to what I've talked about here on the podcast, leads in that regard would be incredibly helpful and powerful. And there was a second thing I was going to say, but I kind of lost it in the midst of my kind of rambling and tirade here. So I guess this is in the spirit of past episodes where I've just sort of shared what's happening in a little bit more of a raw way. And I'll admit this is a little bit more embarrassing to do. It feels, I don't know, it feels a little emotionally invasive. Like not to me, but to you. Like I don't want to do that to you. You're on your drive to work or something, or in the midst of your day, and I don't want to bum you out. But um, but that's also me assuming I have that kind of power over you, and that's not true either. So I got to get over myself in that regard. Um, and I think that kind of brings in the prostration thing again. Is like there has been this over and over getting to know and getting over myself. Claire Graves, when he talks about levels of development, he talks about how the move from grave 6 to grave 7, the levels of awareness that he has, that it's a momentous leap, and that momentous leap is characterized by a release of fear and compulsion. And that's mostly what I feel like I'm really trying to let go of. And I think compulsion is a response to fear. So I think it's ultimately about fear. And it's not about letting go of fear in general. Like fear is actually very practical and very healthy. To have fear, if someone's coming to attack you, you need to have some sort of fear response to be able to respond to it, right? So it's a very natural feeling to have fear. But all of this made up fear, like all of this stuff that is like tacked on, like I obviously my reaction to moral superiority is a fear response. But what is that fear? What am I fearing? That's the ongoing curiosity. What am I afraid of? And the clues might be in what someone like Jordan Peterson, or what a lot of religious people right now are afraid of. What are they scared of? And it usually seems like it's fear of being taken over, or fear of like having to conform, or maybe a fear of having to be adaptable. Perhaps. I'm not entirely sure. I think again that's something I'm continuing to explore, because I think there is a reflection of me in there, and as that happens with all projections, right? Uh, so it is most likely a projection because of the fact that it's coming from the outside in. Introjections usually come from the inside out, when it's like I'm providing all sorts of judgments about myself. Like all the should statements that we usually have, those are usually introjections. Those are usually statements from like our parents, or from bosses or something like that, that we need to just let go of and say like, okay, that's not actually something I believe about myself. I don't believe that I need to work 80 hours a week to be successful, or something like that. Those are just kind of internalized narratives. Whereas I think the moral superiority thing is something that I just haven't noticed about myself. And I'm sure others have. And something I think I repressed when I was 16 or so, because I needed to be able to play the game. And I think that was part of what I needed to do to feel like I could fit into culture. My dad is very much a part of that sort of Christian culture. He's always been very eager to be a part of that. Even though he grew up in Puerto Rico, he was very, um, I mean, he's still alive. I don't know if he listens to this podcast, but I don't mean this to be insulting by highlighting this about him, but uh, it reflects in me a little bit, is why I'm bringing it up. But he's always had a little bit of prejudice towards his own people and towards Puerto Ricans, and because of that, I think he's had to adapt to American culture, and I think as a result of that, he's needed to put himself out there in a different way than what is naturally him, and I think a lot of us, when we're seeking individuation, when I'm seeking individuation, we end up betraying ourselves a lot. And I think sometimes those projections are a reflection of how we've betrayed ourselves. In my sense, I was always very naturally morally superior when I was a kid, especially as a teenager, like, fighting against Christianity effectively, and Catholicism that was around me. I questioned so much in Catholic school. We had religion classes, and I hated it, and I was openly rebellious and very zealotous about it, and very righteous. And that whole situation was something that at some point I had to let go of. At some point I had to say, like, okay, I recognize that there are a lot of people in the world that are like this, and I can't spend my whole life fighting this. I have to find a way to fit in and play the game. And since that culture was around me so much, that's what I gave into. And I think in a way I betrayed myself, and I've been kind of fighting myself about that. And, I went to work for my dad, and him being a part of that culture, I didn't necessarily like, I didn't necessarily like become a born again Christian and like lean in, but I didn't fight. I stopped fighting and just played along, kind of thing. So that was a very different situation where I was like, okay, in order to get what I want, or to make some money, or to find a way out of my circumstance and situation, I felt like I needed to play along. So, and often that's what happens when we wall a part of ourselves off that we feel like is bad, that, regardless of the stage of development, sometimes this happens as an infant or a toddler, can happen when you're 8 or 12. In my case, I think this one is referencing when I was about 14 or 16 years old. I think probably closer to 16, 17. And I walled this part off. And it doesn't mean I was never zealotous, but it's that it became less conscious and something that just sort of came out in more selective bursts. And frankly, in my more intimate relationships, which made me quite a jerk when I was in my previous marriage. And I doubt she's listening, but, sorry about that. I'm sure I'll get a chance to have a conversation with her and apologize in person one day. But I was, it's something that I'm, I don't know if, I don't, the word repent feels very strong, but it does feel like there's something I'm personally sort of repenting for, which is this feeling of remorse around the unconscious relationship to that. And so now I'm getting to know the conscious relationship to moral superiority, and wanting to see where this goes. In what ways is it actually helpful, and what other ways can I let some things go? Because I think it is helpful to recognize when maybe my kids are being morally superior and it's not benefiting them. I mean, I see that in them sometimes, or in other people around who are, maybe making critical statements around, uh, about vaccines, or about the way that the government is run, the system's crashing, like, all these different sort of judgments about what we should or shouldn't be doing to serve people or not serve people. Like, it's everywhere. And it's everywhere because I'm tuned to it. It might not be that you're tuned to it. You might not have any of that relationship to moral superiority, and it might not be a problem for you. You might just be very comfortable with saying, like, no, I know where I stand on things, and I'm very much respect that other people stand where they stand. And I think that's maybe the movement that I'm going towards, is like, I having a better sense of compassion for where people stand, and that they don't have to stand where I stand, right? I was actually working with Molly on this because, and hopefully she doesn't feel like I'm exposing her, but we were talking about, she's very open about having had an evangelical Christian past, and some of her challenges with personal relationships has been that, uh, she's so, a part of her history is being evangelical is like converting people. And the idea is that, these things don't really leave you, they just sort of morph or change into different aspects of you. And I think when you grow up in that circumstance, you're used to having to make people adapt to you. And I think that's the way that I've also done it. I think my moral superiority is trying to make people adapt to me versus being adaptable to others. And it does maybe come down to a adaptable persona thing, right? So I'm not talking like traumatic adaptation, or what I did, which was surrender a certain part of myself in order to adapt to a situation. I actually didn't need to adapt to that situation. I could have left. I could have found a way to leave. Uh, I did feel like it was harder to do because of the grip that sort of my dad had on the family. But but for me to adapt now is to actually learn compassion for why people have a sense of moral superiority. Again, it's like trying to understand, what are they defending and what are they scared of? And subsequently, what am I scared of? That's going to be the ongoing question, I think. Um, and in a truly empathetic way, right? Because it's really easy to go down the rabbit hole of accusations. They're just scared of the truth, or they're just scared of, you know, not being the dominant culture anymore, or they're scared of, whatever. Right? There's a certain there's a fear. There's a more universal fear that I think we all have, that I think I'm trying to get to know and trying to tap into through this, and by proxy, having more of that space. And then at the same time, it maybe is getting clearer on what I do actually stand for. I think for a while there, it was about sort of this openness, this sort of general idea of openness, just like everyone's welcome, everyone's lovely, everyone's nice. It's like you kind of have this like rose colored glasses about all of humanity. And I think that's important to have. I think if you can stay there and you can be there and have a good time, great. I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not doing that. That's my guess. Um, you're either before that or after that, or cherry picking the certain topics that are interesting to you. I think there are plenty of other spaces that bring that sort of love and light philosophy. I don't necessarily bring that. That's in me. I have that. And I think there is an idealism there that is beautiful. And there's a certain awe and wonder to the human experience that I think is powerful to experience and to have. Um, but there's also the gritty realism. It's almost like the difference between the 60s and the 70s, right? I mean, if you do a little bit of research, there's actually on Apple TV, there's a great series. I think it's called 1971 or 1972. I forget which year it was, but it's literally called the year 1971 or 1972. And it's all about the music industry and the transitions from the 60s to the 70s. And I think in a lot of ways, developmentally, we do that as well. We go from this idealism, bright eyed, dancing in the forest, hugging everybody, smiling and loving and awe inspiring relationship to the world, to this crash of like, okay, there's some real stuff here and there's some real difficulty, and not everyone has good intentions, and there's actual legitimately real danger in the world. And it's not about abandoning the previous, but both things can exist. It's all beautiful, and there are things to genuinely be concerned about, and to fight for and to stand for. And so I think for me, it's like taking that amorphous love and light thing and trying to turn it into, what do I actually care about? What are the things that I actually stand for? And I think that last episode I did around faith versus faith in God or faith in the universe, I think that's getting close to something I really personally care about, which is like not abusing religion, not forcing your thoughts to be, not faking it. There's something about not faking your relationship to God or religion or being a good person that is really important. I think maybe that's a lot of what triggers me, or at least brings out the moral superiority, is this sort of like faking being a good person. And I do that. I think that's very much an Enneagram 1 projection. I fake being a good person. I'm full of hypocrisies. I have all sorts of id creature desires and responses. I mean, I relate to the Hades archetype, which is very similar to like the Lucifer archetype. Lucifer stands for bringer of light. Like there's I very much relate to the darker side of things, where I'm like, well, yeah, you good people are really hiding all of your darker qualities, but the darker qualities are also like what make us human. So we can't ignore that either. Most of the time, a lot of us are really fighting to maintain that goodness, that love and light. And in that maintaining, we end up causing a lot of harm and damage. When I was a kid, most of my anger about religion was thinking about something like the Crusades. And like millions of people have died over decades and centuries in the name of religion. And like that to me was the most epic contradiction ever. It's like, what are we doing here? What is that? Why is that? That is the ongoing sort of curiosity in my mind. So it is a curiosity, and it's also just like, yeah, I don't think people deserve to be the I don't want to say the word victim. Collateral is maybe the better word in this instance. I think there is a difference in that. Uh, the word victim is getting overly used as like this derogatory term. The same with narcissism, and I think those are both more moral superiority projections. Honestly, oh, you're just being a victim. You're just being a narcissist. Like that's. I feel like that's just more moral projection, moral superiority. So as I've been processing that, that's becoming uh, pretty clear as well. Especially when I look up moral superiority on YouTube. It's all it's a bunch of Jordan Peterson videos or a lot of mostly conservative people that come up on my feed at least. And I do a pretty good job of walking the line of the algorithm so that when I type something in and it comes up one side or the other, it's pretty clear that it's the term that brings that up, not necessarily just me. Um, but it might be my relationship to that term that the algorithm's attaching to. I don't know. But either way, it's a lot more conservative style videos that come up, or podcasts, and maybe more Christian focused videos that are talking about quote unquote woke people, or talking about more liberal college students or anything like that, talking about how they are morally superior. And it's funny because I get in my head about it and I'm like, oh yeah, you're upset. They're like, you're the victim of college kids. Wow. How scary. But these are the things that I also need to uh, put into my head. Oh wow, really? You're scared of that? Okay, sure, buddy. And so I think it's just a matter of getting a little bit more specific about what it is that I'm actually like, feeling like I'm the victim of, or experiencing the collateral damage of. Um, and as the world gets increasingly more hostile is the word that comes up, but it's probably more than that. Um, there's just a lot more activity happening. It's ramping up. There's more happening moment to moment, uh, with uh, basically the chess pieces being put on the board, so to speak, and moves starting to happen. That you know, there's also a relationship to the country I live in. The United States is very much like has a lot of moral superiority going on, and I think developmentally it's a factor as well. I think there is a relationship to Spiral Dynamics Blue. It's Graves 4, also known as 3.0 or 2.5 ish in the stages model. And it's this place where it's this sort of collective, uh, it's the conformist stage in the stages model, and also known as the expert stage. But the conformist stage is mostly, I think, what I'm talking about here. It's that blue stage of development where it's civilization, it's society. And a lot of what more morality does for civilization is it creates the rules, right? It's like you don't do this or you do this. It's the rules that are not necessarily written on a slab, but it's the rules that are socially passed amongst everybody. We do this and we don't do this. One example in America is that we don't typically talk about how much money someone makes, and that's why, like, I think it's probably part of the embarrassment of me asking for money, because in our culture we don't typically talk about how much money we're making. We're not transparent about that, and that's just something that's very much leaked into everyday life. Like I have no idea who how much money someone makes or what they have. Like, and if you see me at an art event or something, you have no sense that I'm broke. There's no projection of that. And I think part of our culture also is that we're, we put a lot of effort into persona. We're very social, an Enneagram social 3 culture. So it is about projecting some sort of professionalism or success, even if you're not doing well. you know so the challenge there is that I think this is also, you know cultural, in that it's connected to maybe my Enneagram type, but also the culture that I've grown up in, as part of being an American, and what that means in terms of, USA, 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 even though we've done a lot of shitty things, and can still try to take the moral high ground. I mean, even in the and this is not my personal opinion. This is just my observation. But in the sort of Israel Iran conflict that's been going on, I watched after some stuff happened yesterday with the missile launches from Iran. There was a press briefing from the U.S., and a lot of the terminology was just moral posturing, like, you know, well, we understand that Israel has the right to defend themselves, and we're going to support them, and just a lot of the language being used came off to me as like, well, they're in the right, and so we're going to support them because they're in the right. And we understand that if you're going to get attacked by a quote unquote terrorist organization, then you're going to defend yourself, and how they respond is up to them, and blah 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 blah. But there's very much like a moral defensiveness. It's very morally slippery, and and morals are very much like a Graves for Blue thing. It's about keeping a sort of unified, almost simplified sense of moral values, a subjective sense of moral values, to say, like, this is what we believe and this is what they believe, and they're the bad guys because they believe something different. And if they believe something different and our people buy into that, then that erodes a sense of country and culture and the developmental level. So it's very it's very understanding that there would be a defensiveness to that. And then at the same time, when you get to later developmental worldviews, usually the love and light place, where you're starting to get interested in psychology and depth and stuff like that, where you're like, well, it's all gray area, it's all ethically ambiguous, and ethics are starting to look at, well, what are the things that cross cultures? What are the things that are not just about American morals or Iranian morals or Israeli morals or Ukrainian or Chinese or whatever, but it's like, what are universal human ethics? And perhaps that's part of what I'm really getting to know, on top of my own sort of moral sense. Because I think what I needed to do when I was a kid, when I was 16, is I had a different set of morals than I felt my country had, or the religion that I was surrounded by had. And again, in order to move forward, in order to to get a job and all of that stuff, I needed to conform. And I think I'm starting to feel that way today. And I think that's why I find this podcast special. I find some of the people I've connected with through Personality Hacker really special, is that it is harder to go generally into the world. And now it's not just religion, it's an other types of religion, it's diversity and inclusion style of religion, where it can get, depending on who you're talking to, it can get more or less zealous than others. And if you're not preaching that gospel, then you're not welcome in the door. If you don't look the part, you're not welcome in the door, right? And part of me feels like that's part of the victim identity. That's me saying, like, I'm a victim of them, or I'm a victim of, just as I was saying I'm a victim of Christianity, also saying that I'm a victim of of the DEI people, diversity, equity, inclusion, the woke people, quote unquote. And those are so many of my friends that I'm surrounded by. Uh, and I'm probably just finding excuses for why things aren't working out for me right now. But I think a lot of it is this path of releasing the victim identity, releasing some of this moral superiority, which is isolating, and then kind of tapping into this prostration energy of like, okay, who are the people I actually connect with? What is my access point to existence? And how often am I actually surrendering to the moment? How often am I surrendering to trust in my own body's intelligence and my ability to have genius visit me, right? Some of it is continuing to do this work and talk on the podcast, but like I also am needing to let the potential for new opportunities and ideas to visit me, because I keep trying old things, trying old methods, and it's not quite working. And also improving my relationship to rejection. So, as I was mentioning earlier, I don't know that I finished what I was saying actually, that I was feeling a little dysregulated, and am still a little bit, but talking through all of this actually helps. That I was rejected from a job that would have been a well-paying job, and I feel like I would have done pretty well, and I was ready to show up to. And you know, even though there's everything in my bones that doesn't want a job, actually, um, that uh, ultimately I just still show up to. I was ready. I was ready to show up to that. I was ready to do that. I was ready to do what needed to be done to get caught up and to just like get out of this limbo that I find myself kind of stuck in right now. In the Gene Keys, there's this channel. There's this section called the Pathway of Realization, and I think I'm in that space. And I think I've found like my core wound around rejection and abandonment, and part of my conformity was about avoiding rejection, avoiding abandonment, and often fearing rejection means not trying things. So there is a willingness to try more, to put more effort into stuff that I actually care about and want to do, namely this podcast and the work surrounding all of this and what that means, and promoting the courses and things like that. I think at the top of these emails actually is the link to one of the courses, so you can check that out too. Um, and I want to be of service, and I'm just continuing to try to find the best way how. uh, that last episode that I posted about faith and faith versus faith and existence got a couple of people talking, so I think that's a good sign. I think I'm headed in an interesting direction, because I do see actually a lot of people who are faith-based, who have been religious in their life or been religious in their past, feeling like they're disconnected from the religion they grew up in, even though they haven't abandoned their faith, they haven't quote unquote deconstructed, they still just kind of don't recognize it, and they feel like they're holding their own torch. But I think there are still people who embody ethics even though they're not attached to the vagaries of the moral superiority of the morals, right? So I think I'm wanting to stay connected with you guys who are wanting to sort of figure out a better way, or find or share with each other, because maybe you have worked through this, or maybe you have personally found a better way to not feel so alone in this exploration. Uh, and whatever I can do to support your relationship to whatever you're working through, to whatever how you can access stillness, uh, is pretty important to me, because I think ultimately it's all about expanding the light of human consciousness. I think if we can, uh, there's this, I heard this basically statistic that like every individual person can have an impact on up to 90,000 people. And often we think about changing the world or saving the world as like stuff we have to do outside. And sure, that's a result of usually doing internal work, but doing the internal work and sometimes just being a presence, showing up to someone and being a calm nervous system, or being someone that's accessible, or someone who is sharing interesting concepts, or someone who is just able to provide uh, a hug or a thought process is enough. And I think maybe that's some of my work too. Is like it is enough for me to get still and to worry about regulating myself, and to be um, to be to basically say that the best way for me to show up to reality and to show up to be of service is to include myself in that, and to not just burn myself out. So anyway, these are things that I've talked about a million times over and over again. I think at this point I'm exploring some of those ideas and how to go forward from here, and that'll manifest in some future episodes, I'm sure. So I appreciate you for listening. Let me know what you think. Please come onto the Substack page and comment there, because then it helps with SEO, and you can see each other's comments, and you can start talking with each other as well, not just with me directly by replying to the email. That would be really great, because I do want some conversation to start, and for people who are of like minds to find each other. And from there, if that becomes the case, where maybe a community is needed on like Discord or something like that, I can make that happen. But I need a better sense of where you're at and what you're wanting and how I can be of service. Because yes, I can ask for help, and I have, and I appreciate you for providing it if you can. Um, Patreon.com/dopamine, dopamine.substack.com. You can become a premium member there. You can send cash to Let's Go C Note if you'd like, or buy one of my courses, which is also at the top of the page at dopamine.substack.com. Just click courses, and in particular, check out the Three Wisdoms course, which I think is really fascinating for most people to check out. And or if there's any other way that I could be of service to do some video editing or coaching, tutoring about levels of development stuff, um, anything to that degree, I'm open to it. I'm looking for opportunities. I'm looking for the lifeboat, and that I've probably already passed by a couple times. Um, so I just want to say, above all, whether or not you support, I appreciate you for being a listener. I will continue to make this podcast as long as there's a desire for me to do so, and topics that keep coming up. And I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time on Dopamine. And if you don't know, my name is Christian Rivera, aka C Note. All right. See ya.